So I'm going to make it record it to the cloud. Okay. So everybody, welcome so much coming back to this channel. We're going to have this near-death experience interview with Diana Cruz. All I got to say is I'm super excited for what we're about to find out together. And this is going to be a great conversation. So Diana, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your schedule really to come hang out with us. And I really love your jacket. It's very cute.
Oh, this is a Cole special.
Love it. Love it. So I was hoping that you could spend some time with us just kind of talking what led up to your near-death experience, how you moved through it, what happened, all the nooks and crannies, and anything that you want to share with us. I know everybody would love to hear because it brings such peace to people's hearts.
Well, I hope you have a lot of time because my story is a little bit complex. My story starts as a little girl. I was always very, very close to my grandmother, and she always used to say, there's just something very special and very different about you. And I was always just one with my grandmother. We were always very uniquely bonded. And what I didn't realize later is, as religious as she was, she always had a little bit of a spiritual side to her where she was always sort of able to connect. And she used to always pray when we got in the car, and she would always say, you're going to know something before it happens. So if you do, let grandma know. And I never really knew what that meant until I got a little bit older. And I remember I brought this boy home from college, and she was going through breast cancer, and she was a little bit in and out of it mentally. And I remember her telling him, you better treat her well. She's very unique and she's going to go places. And I remember after he left, she said, he's going to stop you from being a nurse. Don't ever settle for less. Go on and get your degree, because from a divorced woman, times two, you're going to want your nursing degree. And she was very, by the time I graduated nursing school, she was very Alzheimer's, and she had moved to Arizona. So I didn't really have much contact with her. But I ended up becoming a nurse. And even though she couldn't remember, I remember my graduation day calling her and telling her I became a nurse. I graduated nursing school. And then the week that I graduated nursing school, I landed my dream job in labor and delivery, and I bought my first car, and I was getting ready to move out of my parents' house, and I was so excited. I was becoming such a big girl, and I couldn't wait to get my life started. And I was picking up a ton of overtime so that I could afford the life that I really wanted. And this one night I had a patient in labor, and right at the change of shift, it was decided we needed to do a C-section, and it started to snow outside. It wasn't really that slippery out, but I remember I was like, it was New Year's Eve. I was getting ready to go to Boston later that night after I went home and slept. I was going to hang out with my friends from college, and I was so excited. And on my way home, I was like, I'm going to get a spray tan. And I stopped in to see a girlfriend, and I sort of made the most of that morning. And I called my buddies from nursing school, and I was like, I'm going to head home. I'm going to take a little nap, and then I'll reconvene with you later. But it was starting to get slippery out at that point. And I was like, let me just drive home and see how the roads are. And I said, I can promise you that I'm going to drive safe, but I can't promise you about the other person. So I hung up the phone, started to drive, and I just got this really overwhelming feeling that I was going to have a car accident. And that was sort of the first premonition that I had, that I really had to trust my gut. And as I started going down this tiny little hill, I remember thinking, okay, my mom and my grandmother would have prayed, and they would have told me to tap the brakes and slow the speed and make sure you can control the car and all that happy stuff. And I remember seeing this caravan, and the headlights were really bright. And I remember just seeing them come at me and thinking, oh my God, I can't stop and I'm going to hit this person. And I heard the shatter of glass and metal, and my whole world went white. I was spinning, I was going down this tunnel. I felt so much peace. And I remember just swirling in this world of white. It was almost like you fell into a pile of cotton balls. And it was so warm. It was so peaceful. There was no concept of time. You literally just felt like you wanted to be in this place forever. It was just, it was almost like a fog of white. You couldn't do anything wrong. There was no negativity. And I remember feeling at so much peace and like I wanted to be here forever. It was just so much love and acceptance. And it was very apparently short-lived, because all of a sudden I came out of it and I was back in my car and there were car parts everywhere. And I remember just this sheer feeling of panic, panic, panic. And like, oh my God, you've got to get out of the car. My nurse instincts kicked in and it was like, get out of the car. And I couldn't open the driver's side door. I couldn't get out. And I didn't even know which way I was facing. Am I upside down? Am I right side up? Which way am I going? And I had this cute little skylight window and I flipped it open and realized there was still snow coming down. I must have been right side up. And I had the steering wheel embedded into my chest. And I remember thinking, somebody's going to hit you from behind or the car is going to blow up, because literally my whole body, I was crunched in like an accordion. I could not see anything. And I reached over to the passenger side door and everything was so crunched in that it was easily reachable. And I opened the passenger side door and I picked up the steering wheel and I shifted it off to the side and just thought, you're going to need to just get up and go. And I went to pick up my legs to tuck them under me, and my foot on my right leg wasn't coming with the rest of my leg. It was sort of detached. And I remember I was wearing a snow boot. So I picked up the tall end of the snow boot and was like, okay, come on, little foot, we gotta go. And I tucked it, the whole thing under my leg. And I just dove myself out of the car. And I was putting snow inside of my boot so that the swelling could go down, because instantly I could just feel it puffing up. And I was crawling to, I was in a ditch and I was crawling to the roadside where people were just running to my car going, I can't find anybody in the car. I can't find anybody in the car. And I was trying to scream, I'm here, I'm down here. And I crawled up to the edge of the seat and I was telling everybody, I can't get my boot off. Don't try. Wait till the paramedics get here. I was shoving snow down the boot. And I was yelling, I'm having a really hard time breathing. And people were asking me, do you know your name? And I was like, yes, my name is Diana. And they were like, can you give us anybody's contact info that we maybe could get a hold of? And I looked at the person and I remember thinking, oh my God, you know my family. And as a nurse and somebody that was raised in a very medical family, and my dad was the fire chief in town, he was very prominent, everybody knew my dad. And I remember thinking, taking driver's ed, oh my God, my worst fear would be my father showing up on the scene of a car accident and it being one of his own. And I looked at him and I realized he was the chief of fire in the town that the car accident happened, which is right over the border from my hometown. And I said, you need to be very careful when you tone this car accident out, how you word it, because my dad is the fire chief. And I told him my dad's name and my mom's number. And I was like, I'm totally aware, I'm coherent, I know what's going on. And some woman who I'll never forget her name, she was so sweet. She said, is there anybody that I can call? And I said, my mom. And I gave her my mom's number. And she phrased the car accident so sweet that my mom was like, oh, okay, my daughter's been in a fender bender. And so she started to walk up to the hospital, and she was with my sister-in-law, who was an ER nurse and was hugely pregnant with my nephew at the time.
Oh, goodness.
And they heard that over the scanner, the jaws of life had been initiated, which was my car because nobody could get the driver's side door open. And then they heard that CPR was en route in session with the other lady. And um, my mom called my dad, who was with my brother in that same town. And my mom said, oh, did you hear the car accident on the scanner? That was Diana. And my dad was like, oh boy, just head to the hospital. So there goes my mom and my sister-in-law. My dad shows up as I'm getting wheeled in the ambulance. And my brother's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm totally fine. For some reason, I still had that overwhelming, peaceful calmness to me. And I was wheeled in the ambulance. They were able to get the boot off. My brother went with me. And when we got there, preface, my brother's a paramedic, so everybody knew him too in town. And so when we got to the hospital, my mom said, oh, how's her little car? I already contacted so and so, who's the owner of a body mechanic, a really good family friend, owner of a body mechanic shop. He said he could fix her car. And she shows up at the hospital and she says, I'm here, my daughter's been in a fender bender. And they're like, oh, no, right this way, you're going right here. And so my brother comes into the hospital with me, and they bring me to this room. And my mom's asking my brother, how's her little car? My brother's like, oh, no, it's totaled. It was a head-on collision. There's no repairing this. There's no auto body shop. Like, it is, she's gonna need a new car. And so they're going down the list, are you having any pain? I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, do you want anything for pain just in case? I'm like, no. I was in complete shock. The only thing I felt was just so cold because I'd been sitting in snow. So my clothes were soaked. They were trying to take everything off me. And they were like, we're going to send you for imaging. And I was in the x-ray booth, and my sister-in-law was there waddling around going, this is my sister-in-law. She's also a nurse. These were her colleagues. So she was like, please be good to her. Let her know what's going on. She wants to know. And this guy was doing the x-rays, and all I could think was, take this neck brace off. I can't breathe. I just kept saying, like, my chest is so heavy. I thought my sternum was broken. And he was doing all these x-rays. It must have been about 3 hours of x-rays. And I remember just like dozing off in between. And he's like, I could take your neck brace off, but it's going to hurt. You've got multiple broken ribs, and, your leg is really bad. I don't know how you even managed to get out of the car. And I was like, I don't know, but show me my leg. And he's like, nope, I can't show you your x-rays. I'm like, dude, from a nurse to an x-ray tech, like, you gotta show me my leg. I gotta see these things. And he's like, I don't think you want to see that. And when I finally convinced him and I looked at the x-rays, I remember thinking, you're right, buddy. I don't want to see it. Oh my God, that bad boy is not attached at all. Like, that's going to be surgery. And I remember him saying, yeah, so, yeah, I don't know about your chest though. Like, you got a lot of injuries. I got to get you back to your room because the trauma surgeon's coming. I'm thinking, trauma surgeon, what the heck? No. And so I get back to my room, and all of a sudden it's starting to get a little chaotic. Nobody can start an IV. Of course, my brother comes in. He's got an IV. My sister-in-law comes in. She's getting an IV. And it's like a family affair in the ER. I'm like, why did I even bother coming to the emergency room? I could have just gone home. And the nurse came in. She's like, yeah, so we're going to send you for a CT scan because you've got a pretty bad fracture to your leg, and you have multiple broken ribs, mostly on the left side. So we want to know what's going on in between. So it just seemed like everybody that came into the room, it was a new ailment, it was a new injury, it was something catastrophic. And so when I was wheeled into the CT bay, I remember saying, okay, no more bad news. I've had it for the day. And, you know, the team was there, and I remember them putting the contrast dye in me. And if you haven't had a CT scan, when contrast dye goes in, you feel so warm. And I remember thinking, oh, thank God, finally. And I actually fell asleep during the CT scan. And they kept telling me, okay, you need to take a deep breath in. And I remember thinking, that's a tall order. I can't breathe, you know? And so when they wheeled me back out, they all surrounded my bed, and the look on their faces was so grim that I knew something's terribly wrong. And they said, well, you've got a pretty significant pneumothorax, which is a collapsed lung. And I said, okay, so the kind that's going to resolve itself, or are we talking I need a chest tube? And he was like, you need a chest tube. And looking at your vitals, you need it now. And so I was wheeled into the trauma bay, and all hell broke loose. They had my family come in to say goodbye, and they had the code cart come in. They had everybody that knew anything medical, it felt like, was in my trauma room. And you know, my sister-in-law was in there, and they were telling my family she's got some pretty significant injuries that we don't deal with here. We recommend that she be transferred to a higher level of care, which I knew was Maine Medical Center. I mean, the end all be all is at Maine Medical Center, which is my dream hospital. And I trained there, and I had clinicals there. So I knew I'm going back to my ortho neuro unit where I trained on in clinical. I'm like, this is awkward. And my vitals started crashing, and I remember them calling them out. And I had one person splinting my leg, and they were saying, we don't do that injury here. And I was so in shock. And I was looking at the orthopedic surgeon splinting my leg, and I was like, oh, your wife was my librarian in elementary school. I'm like, tell your wife I said hi. And he's like, I'm going to wish you good luck. And hopefully I see you in recovery. And, they were telling my family, we're going to transfer her and we're going to get her out as soon as we can, but we do have to do a chest tube. And, her leg injury, and they were talking, and I was trying to listen in, but I was trying to follow directions because they were prepping me for a chest tube, which is that's a big deal. And they were like, she's probably not going to be able to walk for a very long time. And I remember my sister's wedding was coming up, and she was bawling, and I said to her, I'm like, don't cry, I'm going to be walking down your aisle. And she was like, that's my bridesmaid. And so my whole family was walking out, and they were just in tears. And when the fire department and the ambulance, all the paramedics in town heard who was in the car accident, there were people waiting outside my trauma bay, just lined up. It was ridiculous. Of course, that's my whole entire family because it's a small town. And I remember my brother was like, I'm gonna stay with her. And my mom was like, no, get out. They have to do a catheter. They're cutting off her clothes. And I remember them telling me, I need you to get onto your side. We're going to give you this medication to sedate you. I remember saying, no, life or limb, let's go. I'll roll over onto my side, do a chest tube. And my sister-in-law was holding onto my hands. And I remember them saying, she's crashing. Here are her vitals. And I remember that feeling of wanting to go out again. And my sister-in-law looking at me and saying, just talk to me. Just keep talking to me. And I remember telling her, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here when you deliver your baby. And I was the only one that knew the name of the baby. And so I remember telling her, everybody's going to know the name of the baby. I'm going to be able to tell everybody the name of your baby. And she was like, yeah, but don't say it yet. Don't say it yet. And we were sort of having a little banter. But I remember hypno birthing, just like I would do with a patient of mine in labor. I was hypno birthing the chest tube. And let me tell you, that was the worst pain of my entire life. But I knew like I have to have it or I'm going to die. And I remember thinking, you are so on the cusp right now. And I had my chest tube, they stabilized me, and they were like, bye bye, you're going, Maine Medical. And I was in the back of the ambulance and I was calling my twin sister and I was telling her she was in New York and she was trying to get home. Yes, I have a twin. There are two of me. Isn't that scary? But she was trying to drive home from New York. And I remember telling her, everybody's making a big deal out of nothing. She's like, oh my God, you have a chest tube. This is a big deal. And I was like, no, it's fine. I literally had a paramedic in the back of the ambulance pumping my chest, if you can imagine. And I remember calling work and saying, oh my God, I'm scheduled to work Thursday. I got to let you know. And they're like, oh my God, you've got to just focus on your breathing. Just, stay alive, please.
Right.
And I remember going to Maine Medical Center. I knew all of my nurses from my clinical experience. It was, such a happy time, but a very humbling experience because I was in the hospital for such a long time that I remember my biggest feat was my wheelchair rides. Once the chest tube was removed, I remember my wheelchair rides to other units. I just had to get out of that room, but I had to go to physical therapy to learn how to, believe it or not, get on and off a toilet. You couldn't use crutches. So I had to navigate life in a wheelchair. And it was such a significant leg fracture that they couldn't operate right away. And I remember the long road, ahead of me and practicing getting in and out of a car. And when I went home, I remember the fire department was there and they took my wheelchair, me in it, and, hauled me up into my house. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my whole life in front of me just changed. And I'm basically a 24-year-old toddler where I have to be fed, I have to be bathed. The essentials of life were taken away from me. And I remember that morning and that grief that I felt. And I focused every day on doing something today that I couldn't do yesterday. And something as simple as being able to wear a bra again or graduating from home health was such a dramatic change for me. And I eventually went on to relearn how to walk after 6 months. And I went on to graduate my wheelchair. And believe it or not, I made it to my nephew's birth. I kept threatening him.
You went dark.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, I got a sales call. I threatened him, don't you dare come until I'm out of, this boot. And so, of course, my sister-in-law had to be induced. So I threatened my poor little nephew. He wouldn't come out until I was in a boot, my little love. And so I made it for his birth, wheelchair and all. And, when I graduated from all of that, I ended up walking down the aisle at my sister's wedding. My shoes weren't cute by any stretch, but I could walk in them. But I did what I said I was going to do. And as a cross country runner, that was really tragic because I was never able to run again. That was the only thing that I never really regained. And so I went on to meet the love of my life. I had such a great summer and we bought our first house and we adopted our dog, our little rescue dog. And we went on to get married and we had such a beautiful wedding. And I remember calling my grandmother and telling her, Grandma, I'm getting married. And she said, aren't you 13? She was very out of it. But I knew she knew that I was getting married. And she knew that I became a nurse. And we went on to, have such a happy life. We had my little girl and we renovated our house. We basically just lived life in this mentality of do something every day that you couldn't do the day before. That was always my mission. And I suffered really bad postpartum depression with my daughter. And I honestly didn't think that I would ever have another baby. I was so content with her. She was such a dream baby. And we went on to renovate our house, sell it, and we built the house that we're in now, such a dream house, and we have so much land. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my life is perfect. And I went and saw a psychic, and she said, oh my God, you had a white light experience. What have you been doing to hone in on your gift? And I was like, what gift? Nothing. But our old house was very haunted. And I was the only one that could pick up on things going on in the house. And it was sort of like the energies would always talk to me. And I was trying to get my husband on board with the woman in the house. And it wasn't until we met some guy that knew the family of the house that he validated everything that I said, what room, whose bedroom it was. The only people I couldn't connect to were the older two sons. And he said, oh, it's because they're still alive. But he even had to consult with his sister because this was back, in, the 40s and 50s. So he was older. So he had to consult his older sister to get some of the info. But he was like, I can't believe you knew all that. And, so here I am. We've just built our house. I'm talking to the psychic who's telling me, oh my God, you're going to have another baby. And I'm like, no, you're crazy. And she's like, no, you're going to have another baby. And, your birth experience is not going to go what you thought it would be. But your pregnancy is going to be so much better. And I was like, okay. And she's like, but you need to work on your gift. You need to work on your gift. But something tells me you're going to come into it after the birth of your baby. And I was like, are you kidding me? No way. And so wouldn't you know it, 3 months later, surprise, we're pregnant. And I told all my OBs, this is it. We're done. Tie my tubes. We're done. Boy, girl, I don't care. And around 20 weeks, I was at this in service for work. We had gotten this new piece of equipment. Whenever there's a new piece of equipment, you got to go through an in service. So we all learn how it works. And around 20 weeks, I'm in this, it's called the rapid infuser, and it can drop blood into you in 6 minutes or less in somebody that's really critical. And here we are at the in service. And it was just like a deja vu. All of a sudden, I'm getting this feeling of how my birth experience is going to be with my son. And I'm with my night crew, the people that know me, the people that may or may not love me, but they work with me. We work really well together. And I said, okay, you guys, the words I used were a little bit more hostile. I will refrain, but it was an F-bomb. And I said, listen up, explicit. You better be paying attention to this because you're going to need it in my delivery. Oh my gosh. They said, you're so dramatic. No, we're not. You're going to be fine. And I had this very clear premonition that I was going to deliver my son. It was going to be fine, but I would have such a bad hemorrhage that I would need to go back to the operating room, and I wouldn't lose my uterus and I wouldn't lose my fallopian tubes. And it was so clear. And at every appointment from that point on, I remember telling them, this is the premonition that I had about my delivery. This is what's going to happen. And if you need to take my uterus, just take it if it's easier. And they were like, we're not even listening to you. Stop it. You're so dramatic. Oh my God. And I told them every single appointment, just be warned. I don't think this is going to be the delivery that we're all thinking it's going to be. And I had a great relationship with my in-laws. And I remember telling my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I'm happy if you guys want to be in the room. When I get back from the operating room, I'm so happy, bring our daughter and you can stay. But if at any point I tell you guys to get out of the room, I want you to get out of the room. And my father-in-law was traveling. And so he was going to come back that day to meet our son. And I told everybody, I'm so happy if everybody wants to be there. And my mom was going to come. My twin sister was going to come. I was sort of gearing up for like the best day of my life, the day that I'm delivering my son. And I told all my colleagues, I want you all to be ready. If I'm separated from my son, which I know I'm going to go to the ICU, if I'm separated from my son, I want you to just feed him, bathe him, do whatever, just take him out of the room so that my poor husband can actually like function, because he can't feed our child. And so the day of my delivery came and we're going over the bridge, and I said to my husband, okay, I just want to reiterate, if at any point I tell everybody to get out of the room, I need you to get out of the room ASAP. And he's like, no, you're going to be fine. Well, the day of our delivery, here I was sitting in my room. The operating room is backed up. The massage therapist came in. She's like, I'm so excited for you. Do you want a massage? Well, the OR is backed up. I'm like, hell yeah, I want a massage. And we were chit-chatting, everybody was coming in. They're like, I'm so sorry, the OR is backed up. I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm good. I knew that was not going to go as planned.
Right.
I knew that my day was going to be very hectic. And so I was just enjoying the beautiful summer day for what we had. And, my kid's pediatrician happened to be on call, and she came in and she said, I'm on call, but you don't need me in the room when you deliver. So I'm in the building. And I said, I hope you're going to be in the room. I really do hope you're going to scrub in and get in the OR, because I'm going to need you in the room when I deliver. And she's like, no, it's your second C-section. You don't need me in the room. You're good. I was like, oh, I don't know. I just got this feeling. And so everybody was in the room waiting for me to come out of the operating room, all of my family. So into the operating room I go. It's, we're chit-chatting. There's such a friendly banter. It's everybody that I know and everybody that I love. And, such a highly trained group of doctors and nurses, everybody that I handpicked. And, my son is born. He's blue, he's limp, he's floppy. He has an okay heart rate, but he's not breathing. He's not crying. So they call a rapid response for him. In comes my pediatrician. She's like, why? You told me that was going to happen. Why didn't I listen to you? I'm like, don't worry about it. So I'm reassuring my husband. He's fine. He's fine. So I'm like, you know what? Take him to the nursery, give him a spanking, get him to transition, and then you can bring him back. Like, I don't need to put him skin to skin right away. Get him to breathe. And so she came back in. She's like, he's fine. He needed exactly what you said, a little spanking and some TLC, but he'll be in the room when you get wheeled back in. I'm like, that's fine. And, in he comes. He's having so much blood sugar issues. So I'm trying to breastfeed him. I've got him skin to skin. I'm doing all the things that I would tell one of my patients to do. And we had such a nice little recovery. My niece was there. Everybody was there. We were opening big sister presents. And my husband had just held him for the first time. And he was just sort of cuddling our son, and my daughter was kissing him, and my family was surrounding me. And my twin sister, who of course is a physician's assistant in the city, who knows it all, was looking at me. And I started to feel very warm, and I started to feel very nauseous. And my twin sister's looking at me, and it's now my best friend, who's my labor nurse. She's changed over from my other best friend. And so she's like, I came in extra to take you because the unit's really busy. And we were each other's labor and delivery nurses with both of our kids. We had a little exchange. And so it was really special to have her with me. And she's looking at me and she's like, you don't look so good. And my twin sister's like, has your heart rate always been that high? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I had my arm bent when the blood pressure was going off. And so my sister's like, yeah, she doesn't look very good. And so my nurse is like, yeah, I'm going to get some more people in here. And she, took my blood pressure again, and all these people come in. And when she mentions what my blood pressure is, immediately I said, okay, everybody needs to leave except my mom and my husband. And my mom's like, I'm the only one in the family that's not medical. No. She looks at my twin sister. She's like, I'll take your daughter. You stay. I'll go. And so my sister comes over, and I remember her putting a cold face cloth on my head. And I remember just completely spacing out. And I went into this realm that I was very familiar and very comfortable with. And immediately I felt like I basically went home for real. I went to this room. It was very dark. There was no tunneling experience, but I went into this room where I was all alone, and it was my grandmother. And it was just like you see on TV, the empty room, it's dark, you're basically sitting at a desk and there's the light on, except
Uh-huh.
I felt at total peace. It was just my grandmother and I. And it was almost as if instead of going to the tunnel experience that I had before, I went a little bit further,
Mm,
which made me think there are levels.
mm,
And I was sitting in this room and I was having a conversation with my grandmother, and she said, Diana, do you want to keep going on, or do you want to go back and finish your life? And I remember thinking, I didn't get the chance to have a choice before. But now that I do, I said, you know what, Graham? I have I have become a nurse, which was my lifelong dream. I met my husband. I've always wanted to get married. I had my little girl and I've met my little boy. My life has been pretty perfect. And financially, I felt like I was ready, but that wasn't even really a deterring factor. I
mhm.
just remember that overwhelming feeling of I've accomplished everything that I set out to do and I'm ready to move on. And at that very moment, I was transfused with a unit of blood. And right back then, I was back in my hospital bed. And my best friend and colleague looked at me and she said, Diana, keep talking to me. And I immediately was reminded of my car accident when my
Right.
sister-in-law said those words to me. And I said, oh my God, the second I saw my husband's face, he was a wreck. And I saw my twin sister and she was battling with my colleague saying, she needs to go to the operating room. You need to take her to the OR. And everybody in the room was, I knew the look of panic on their faces because I work with these
Right,
people,
right.
but they were so calm and composed. And I remember thinking, this is bad. This is
Mhm.
bad. If I leave, my husband is alone with a newborn and a 2.5-year-old. And I thought, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I immediately went back into that room and I said, Grandma, is it too late to change my mind? And she said, no. And she was very peaceful and she had this beautiful smile on her face. And she said, you need to live your life. And I went back. I went back, and immediately that was when they had transfused another unit of blood into me.
Mhm.
And it was just pandemonium that I could sense. And I said to them, it's okay. I've already made the decision. I'm coming back. It's okay. I am not going anywhere. But I remember anesthesia was there and he said, Diana, your kidneys are failing. We are literally measuring your urine output in a Dixie cup, which is not good.
Mhm.
And I remember I was starting to go out again. And I said, I can't feel like this anymore. I can't feel like this anymore. And my twin sister said, you need to go to the operating room. And they couldn't find the source of the bleed, but I was bleeding from somewhere. And I didn't look like I was bleeding externally at all. And they kept asking, are you having any pain? And I was like, no. And my twin sister was right there with me. And she kept saying, she is having pain. She's stoic. She's not going to tell you. And she looked at me and she was like, tell them you're having pain. You are having pain. I know you're having pain somewhere. And she was like, you need to go to the OR. Tell them you want to go to the OR. And I remember saying to my colleagues, I'll do whatever you guys need me to do. If you want to take me to the OR, I'll go to the OR, but I'm not having any pain. For real, I'm not having any pain. And I remember my husband saying, oh my God, stop putting stop putting your arm up her. And I remember thinking, I'm okay. I'm okay. I just had people poking and prodding. And I remember my kid's pediatrician getting my second IV because nobody could get it. I was in shock. I was flatlined. I remember seeing my director with the code card and she was recording. And I remember thinking, this is not good. And there were people from the ICU that had shown up to the rapid response. And I remember my obstetrician said, okay, we're going to go to the operating room. And there was the rapid infuser dumping blood into me. And they wheeled me down to the operating room. And I remember still to this day, my colleagues talk about the scariest moment was seeing me completely gray and limp in the bed while it was pandemonium getting me onto the elevator. And the look on my family's faces when they were telling them, you know, we could call a priest in for you. And they kept saying your family was just distraught. And I remember going to the operating room and I looked at my colleague and I said, am I going to the ICU after this? And she said, I don't know, point blank. And I remember my friend and colleague who was anesthesia, and he said, I can't quite stabilize you through your IV because your IV has blown because you're so critical. He said, I'm going to have to start an arterial line. And he's like, I'm going to have to sedate you. And I said, don't do it. It's life or limb. Let's go. And so just like the chest tube, he just inserted an arterial line. And what that does is it's sort of an IV and an internal monitor to kind of assess my blood pressure for people that are really critical. And at this point I was, and nobody could get an IV. It was so panic struck in the operating room because at this point I was so out of it that I was basically in between two worlds. And I remember falling asleep under general, and except I sat up on the operating table and I knew I was not sitting up. I was able to look at myself and my body, and I was able to look down at my abdomen as they were making the incision where they had just made the incision for the C-section. They reopened that, and I remember just blood was pouring out of me. And every time my heart beat, blood just kept just pouring. And all of the blood that they had just transfused me with was just pouring out of me. I could see it going down the bed. I could see it just everywhere. And everybody was scrambling to try and stop the bleeding. And I remember my colleagues, my obstetricians that were on either side of me, they were very blurry. But there were a lot of people in the operating room that were very clear. And it was almost like they were beside everybody that was in the operating room. And there was one man in particular on my left, and he was standing beside one of the obstetricians. And I knew his name. I'd never met him, but I knew his name. And I kept saying, Neil, you need to tell your sister it's going to be okay. You need to tell your sister. All the while they're scrambling to stop the bleeding. And he was like, I know, I'm trying. I know she hears me. And we were having this dialogue. And I remember telling her, it's going to be okay, everybody. Slow down. I've already made the decision. I'm going to come back. It's okay. And I was so at peace. And I knew the relationship. It was a brother-sister relationship. And he and I had what I thought was a really long exchange of words. In reality, it probably wasn't, but you have no concept of time. And I remember just identifying random people in the room. It was almost a familiar identity, even though I didn't even know half these people. I had never met these people in real life. And, you know, I was sort of familiar with the OR team, but I didn't know their loved ones that were in spirit. But I knew these people were in spirit.
So wait a second. And I have to understand this because now I got a little confused. So you're on the operating table. You're bleeding out basically. They're trying to figure out where you're bleeding from. You don't know. But now you're out of your body. You're sort of in spirit, watching everybody in the operating room, and everybody who's the person is fuzzy, but everybody in spirit is crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
Crystal clear. And Neil, who's talking to one of the obstetricians, is trying to say, go tell her sister it's going to be okay.
He and I are talking, and I'm telling him, tell your sister it's going to be okay. He's like, okay. I'm trying. But she was so focused.
She in the room with you?
Yeah, she was on to my left. She was one of my obstetricians.
Okay. So your sister was in the room with you.
His sister.
Oh, his sister. Okay. His sister. Okay. All right. Okay. I got that now. I see. Thanks. Okay. So you're there. You're trying to be like, don't worry. I've already made the decision. I'm coming back.
Yep. Yep.
Then what happens?
Then I woke up and I was in PACU, and my obstetrician said, Diana, you're alive. I didn't take your uterus and I didn't have to take your fallopian tubes. And she said, but you are going to the ICU. And I said, okay. And I thanked her, and they allowed my husband to come down. And when escorting my husband to the PACU, they brought my son, and it was one of my really, really great colleagues that was in service for the rapid infuser. And she was just starting her shift. And she came down with my son and my husband and said, you just had to cause trouble, didn't you? And I was like, yep, because as you know, I'm the a-hole and that's what I do. And she was like, oh my God, everybody is so worried about you upstairs. And I remember thinking, why? And she handed me my son and she said, I know what you want for your son. We've talked about it many, many, many shifts leading up to this. I'll take great care of your husband and your son. And I remember, holding my son and just loving on him and saying, I'll be up at some point. I'm going to the ICU. And she was like, don't come back until you're stable because we don't need any more princesses up there. And so I went to the ICU, and I was taken care of by one of the girls that I went to nursing school with and ran cross country with. And she was just so fantastic. And the next morning I woke up and my mom was there, my colleague was there, and my colleague just looked exhausted. And she was like, oh my God, I have been so worried about you all night. I'm so sorry. And I was like, don't worry about it. I knew that was going to happen. And she was like, how did you know at 20 weeks that that was going to happen? And I was like, I don't know. I really don't know. And, I went back upstairs. I had such a great recovery. I felt fine. I was up walking. I, had gotten rid of all the tubes. I was bonding with my son. It was as if nothing ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my colleagues were like, you tried to die on us. And
Right.
I was like, I know, but here I am. I'm like a bad horror movie. I always come back for like one last scare. And so I recovered. I went home. I went back to work after 10 weeks of maternity leave. And I got in touch with this woman, and she was a therapist who was also a very prominent psychic medium. And she said, I feel like you've got a story. And we got together, we talked, and I told her my story. And she was like, oh my God, I need to work with you. I need to work with you. So I wanted to go away for a retreat. But of course, with a newborn and a 2.5-year-old, that doesn't always happen.
Right.
But my husband moved heaven and earth to let me go away for this weekend retreat. And I met some of the most amazing people. And I just started connecting spiritually with these people. And one of the pieces of advice that I was given was to approach my colleague and tell her about her brother being in the operating room. And nobody knew that her brother had passed. And I remember thinking, I don't know as if I can do that,
Right.
I don't know. And there's just so much going on with that. And, there's a side of me that I don't really know if I accept or not. And, I thought a lot about it. And one day, a really good friend of mine called and said, I've got some harsh news for you. I was diagnosed with colon cancer, and, I'm going to fight it till the death. And I was like, oh my God, man, I support you. I'm here, whatever you need. But I don't feel like it's for you. I feel like you're going to be fine. And he's like, okay, well, I'm just, okay, that's weird. I don't know how you know that, but that's okay. Like, I'm going to fight it. I was like, all right, I'm here for you. And no sooner did I hang up the phone with him, I went to nurse my son, and I looked up, and there was the brother in my living room. And
wow.
It was as clear as day. And it was very quick, very quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to work. I was at work one night, and I told her, we were in this delivery. And I told her before we went into the room, I said, I have a funny feeling that this is what's going to happen during this delivery. I think the shoulder's going to get stuck. And so I'm ready. I'm ready. And she was like, "Oh my God, shut up. No, 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 don't put that bad juju in this room." Well, sure enough, the head came out and we were seeing all the warning signs for the shoulder to get stuck. And I looked at her and I said, "Okay, I said, do you remember what I said to you outside of the room?" And she said, "Yep." And so I did all the interventions. Sure enough, the shoulder got stuck and everybody came in the room. We were all ready. And she was like, that was a little bit creepy. I'm going to be honest. How the hell did you know that? I was like, I don't know. And there was a rare moment where nobody was at the nurse's desk. It was just her and I. And I said to her, "Can I ask you something?" I immediately start to sweat. I'm shaking. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. And she was like, "Of course." And I said, "Do you remember when I was in the operating room?" And she's like, "Of course. The whole hospital remembers when you were in the operating room." And I said, "I actually saw what happened." And I told her, "I saw you guys make the incision. And I heard something that you guys said. I will not share that on here, but it was validated and it was terrifying that I knew that. But it was a dialogue that was said in the operating room." And I said, "I heard that. And I watched you make the incision and I watched myself bleed out everywhere. But I said, what I never told anybody, and I would never share this with anybody but you, but I said, there was a man standing behind you. He was very prominent and I could tell you exactly what he looked like. I could tell you his name. And I felt a very brotherly energy." And I said, "So did you lose a brother?" And she was like, "I did." And I was like, "Was his name Neil?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, did he wear glasses?" And she was like, "He did wear glasses." And she started, her eyes welled with tears. And I said, "Did he pass from colon cancer?" And she was like, "Yes, he did." And I was like, "Okay. Was he like obsessed with his hair?" Because I see like this like very prominent tuft of brown curly hair, like so poofy and just fun. And she was like, "He always had his hands in his hair." And I was like, "Okay, but did he have a really strong bond with your child?" And she was like, "Okay, this is creepy." And I was like, "I got to tell you, right after my friend called, he told me his diagnosis of colon cancer. And I told him it wasn't for him. And no sooner did I start nursing my son, I looked up and it seemed like your brother was standing in my living room." She was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, my dead brother is standing in your living room and bothering you." And I was like, "No, no, no, it's really okay." But I was like, I got to tell you, like, the connection was real. And he was wearing a white t-shirt. And, there was just very strong correlation around your daughter. And she was like, "Oh my God, I've got to get this picture." And it was a picture of him with the little girl on his chest, and he was wearing a white t-shirt with his glasses on and his beautiful tuft of hair. He just was a beautiful, beautiful energy. And for a while, that was our little secret. And then I opened up to the other provider who was very stoic. We don't do that. And
that's usually the medical field sort of MO, right? Except
yes, it is.
Here you are changing everything. Nice.
It's so true. And so I pulled her aside and I said, "I want to talk to you about my birth experience." And she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "There's really no sugarcoating this." And she was like, "Is this about Neil?" And I was like, "Well, no, because that's my secret with this other provider." And she said, "Oh my God, no, she told me all about it." She was like, there is something to this." She was like, "I am incredibly shocked." And she was like, I'm still a skeptic, but she's like, "I have to believe that that's true." I'm like, "How would I know?" And then I find out that he lives in London. He doesn't even live, he lives across the pond. He's nowhere near us. Right. So there's no way I could have known about any of this. And so, for a while it was a little joke like, "Hey, what's going to happen tonight?" Or she would ask me, "Hey, can I go home or do I need to stay in the hospital?" And I would tell her, "No, no, no, go home, go home." And she would laugh because it would always be right. And I remember, people started to find out a little bit more on the unit. And were asking me some questions, and one person was like, "Oh, I'm a wicked big skeptic. I don't do that." And this provider whipped around and she was like, "She will change your mind." And I just sort of, for a while, I was a little bit reluctant to share that story because it was like, oh my gosh, how do you die twice and come back twice? But I had made up my mind that I wasn't going anywhere. And
Mhm.
both near death experiences were both very different, but each one I gained a whole lot of insight on, and I just view life very differently. And since then, I've gone on to take on the bereavement team on my unit, because anytime there's a intrauterine fetal death or any kind of tragic event, whether it be in the emergency department, any kind of passing of any kind, it's just a very different experience for me than I feel like it is for other people. And I've sort of made that my mission at work, is to strengthen my skills both professionally and spiritually, and just use it to benefit other people. And I still live by that: do something every day that you couldn't do the day before. And that's kind of what's gotten me through life since that second near death experience. And that was almost 4 years ago. So,
Well, Diana, you said your life was a dumpster fire. Where does the dumpster fire? I don't see it at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
well, that's part three.
Okay. We'll have to do a part 3 because this 1 and 2 is pretty intense. How
Well,
go ahead.
my husband really struggled to bond with our son after the whole experience. And he is a very sciencey person himself. So, if 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, there's
Mhm.
no way it exists.
Mhm.
So, he's had a really hard time coming around to the whole psychic medium, premonitions. We're both very religious. So to him, that no, 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 that's not from God. And it's sort of driven a wedge between my mother and sisters, and, you know, my marriage. And with him not bonding and me wanting to go and expand and advance, it's sort of, we sort of grew on opposite pages, my husband and my family and I. And the more I wanted to grow, the more he couldn't quite grow with me. We just really struggled to find each other and connect. And we went down a very difficult path in our marriage. And one day I was working a 14-hour shift, and I got home. I was so tired. I wanted to go to bed because I had to go back in that same night. And, he served me divorce papers.
Oh,
So here we go.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Diana.
Well, again, I'm going to go through another rebirth of a different sort.
Yeah.
Um, but I know that no matter what, I am not going to die anymore.
Right.
I'm here. I am here.
You're here.
And I'm gonna grow from this. And I'm gonna tap into my strength, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, everything I can get my hands on. And
Mhm.
I just feel like, the world of podcasts and TikToks has really opened up a whole other strength for me. And
Yeah.
I feel like by sharing my story, I hope people can learn and grow from it. um I know for myself personally, no 2 days are alike, and some days are
Mhm.
going to be great, some are going to be like, we'll try again tomorrow. But I just know, no matter what, I will find the strength that I didn't have yesterday that I will have today.
I love that. I think that is so inspirational. I was captivated on your stories. I'm just utterly captivated in the idea that your grandmother met you, it's interesting. I want to ask you a couple of questions. I know
Sure.
that we don't have a ton of time left because I have a thing, but what I'm curious, one of the curiosities is when you met her at the desk, do you remember, like, was the floor warm? Were the everything you said sounded like it was like dark, but could you smell her? Was there any kind of extra sensories things that were happening at that time when you had her in the room, or were you just kind of like, oh, hey grandma, what's happening?
I could feel her. I could feel
Mm.
her both physically and emotionally. Like she was in my bubble. Um, and I could see her smile. I could feel her touch. It was almost like when she always made this face that, when she was in this state of acceptance, she would always make this face. It was almost like this little crinkle. And
Uh-huh.
I remember her almost as if she were going to put her hands on my face when I said, Grandma, is it too late to change my mind? I
Hmm.
remember her almost putting her hands on my face and saying, yes, darling, and having this like cute little face that she would always make as if
Uh-huh.
to say, like, it's okay. This is your life
Right.
and you have to make the best of it. Um, so in that regard, I don't remember a warmth. I just remember just feeling just at peace. There
Mm.
was just, it was almost like when you go to a loved one's house, somebody you're really close to, and they, have baked goods in the oven and the whole house is just warm and inviting and fun and you're pampered and you're doted. And, it's
Yeah.
sort of that same feeling of like loving and just being taken care of and just knowing that you're okay. It
Yeah.
was sort of that same principle.
Well, Diana, I look forward to meeting you in person, and I just want to say, like, I thank you so much for sharing your story, for being so eloquent about it, for one, and I have to say this, it's so important, but the work that you do with bereavement and grief, I can feel and sense the souls of many little souls on the other side that you've helped their parents. So I just want to say that it's very important, the work you're doing. I mean, very important. So I just want to make sure you know that on the other side you're also very exalted as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So yeah, I can't wait to meet you in person. It's going to be so exciting.
Yes, I can't wait either.
I
I hope
unfortunately
that happens with stupid COVID.
Yeah, no, the world's gonna move on soon. it's gonna
I
move on.
feel it.
Yep, it's gonna be awesome. Well, thank you so much. You are incredibly wonderful, and I hope you have a great night tonight.
Thank you. You too.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.